Good morning. My name is Anna Lee, and I work at Vermont Legal Aid at the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. Vermont Legal Aid is a nonprofit law firm that provides civil legal aid. Civil legal issues include things like housing, healthcare, disability law, and senior law. You can find more information on our joint website with Legal Services Vermont, vtlawhelp.org. Thank you for joining us today. Our town hall includes a guest, and you'll be able to ask questions of our guest. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can click on the Q&A box in Zoom where you can type your questions in, and I will ask them out loud. You will also get a written answer to your question from our moderators. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can type questions into the Facebook Live comments, and I will read them out loud. You will also get a written response on Facebook from the moderators after the town hall. If you're calling in or listening over the phone, we don't have a way for you to ask questions from the phone during the live stream, but you can always call Vermont Legal Aid at 1-800-889-2047 to speak with a Vermont Legal Aid or Legal Services Vermont attorney or paralegal for confidential help. There's also a lot of answers on vtlawhelp.org. Our guest today is Jean Murray. Jean, thank you for joining us. Could you introduce yourself for us, please? Oh, Jean, you're muted. One moment.
Thank you. I'm Jean Murray. I'm a staff attorney in the Montpelier office of Vermont Legal Aid. I've practiced housing, landlord-tenant law for quite some time, and I worked together with the Vermont Landlords Association, Vermont State Housing Authority, Department of Housing and Community Development, and the legislative committees in the House, which is House General Housing and Military Affairs, and in the Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. On both the really important pieces of legislation that are protecting Vermonters so that Vermonters can stay in their home during the pandemic, which is the moratorium and the rental housing stabilization programs that we're going to talk about.
Excellent. Let's start off with talking about most recent piece of news from the CDC. The CDC announced an eviction moratorium nationwide. I know Vermont also has an eviction moratorium. Are those moratoriums the same? Is there anything different about how they work?
Yes, so the CDC moratorium does apply nationwide, and it's a good thing. Each state has its own way of dealing with landlord-tenant law and the eviction process. So the CDC moratorium applies no matter what state you're in and no matter what the eviction process is. In Vermont, eviction process has to go through the court. Your landlord can send you a notice to terminate tenancy, but if they need an order to get you out, they have to go through the court. So back in May, Vermont passed a moratorium that requires that all eviction cases that were at the time and have been filed since in court are stayed, and that's a legal word meaning they are paused. So they're just sitting there in court and the court can't take action on them. And that's all evictions and foreclosures in Vermont. So right now the court is not going to issue any orders for anyone to get out of their home. Therefore, no one has to get out of their home in Vermont. The CDC moratorium is based on a tenant, and it applies to rentals only, the tenant making a declaration that they are eligible and then giving that declaration to their landlord. If they do that, then the landlord shouldn't be able to take any steps at all to evict them. The Vermont moratorium lasts 30 days longer than the governor's state of emergency. So it could last past December 31st, depending on how long the governor declares the state of emergency to be in place. the CDC moratorium is set to expire on December 31st. So those are the basic differences.
Okay, so the CDC moratorium only applies to people who meet those specific requirements, and it has a set end date of December 31st. The Vermont moratorium applies to everyone, and we don't know how long it's going to last for because it will last until 30 days after the governor declares the state of emergency over, whenever that might be.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the if people are having trouble paying their rent, the assistance that's available for them. And we did do a town hall about the eviction moratorium on May 7th already. So if you want to go back and watch that, there's more information there. But for now, let's move on to talking about assistance for help with rent.
Yes, Vermont decided as part of the coronavirus relief funds to provide help with rent to make sure that all Vermonters, all renting households could stay in their home. So in Vermont, there are about 76,000 rental households, and half of those households pay more than 30% of household income for rent, and a quarter of those households pay more than 50% of income for rent. So even before a public health emergency, people were what's called cost burdened in terms of being able to pay the rent, being able to make enough money to pay the rent. So even before the pandemic, people were struggling to pay the rent. So now, if people are struggling to pay the rent and have gotten entirely behind, in other words, missed a whole month or more than that, or missed part of a month, there's a fund available to get money from the state so that they can, their landlord can be paid and their rent account can be brought current. So this applies to back rent, rent that is, come due and not yet been paid. And the way it works is both the landlord and the tenant go to Vermont State Housing Authority's website looking for the Rental Housing Stabilization Program applications. The tenant fills out the tenant application. The landlord fills out the landlord certification. The best practice is for those to be submitted together by email in the same email. And once they are put in Vermont State Housing Authority's database, they get paid. The landlord gets paid by direct deposit the next payment date. And those payment dates are happening about every 2 weeks.
Okay, so let's talk about the past due rent help. We did do a town hall about this topic already on July 16th. So let's walk through a few pieces of information about this application. What is the first step for someone if they are behind on their rent and they're thinking about applying for this program? What should they start by doing first?
Well, my advice would be to start by talking to your landlord. And because in order to get full payment of whatever past due rent is owed, both the landlord and the tenant need to apply. And on their application, it should be that the amount that they are saying is past due, the landlord's amount should agree with the tenant's amount. So talk to your landlord, see if your landlord is willing to apply, see if you agree on the amount of rent to be owed. It might be worthwhile to talk about repair issues because the tenant application asks the tenant to say, yes, I believe this is up to the Rental Housing Health Code, and the landlord has to certify that they believe it's up to Rental Housing Health Code, or it will be within 30 days. The program won't pay if there are life safety issues identified, and those are listed. It's a short list on the tenant's application. And if the tenant checks a box that there's a life safety issue, and this really means a condition in the apartment that is really unsafe, like sparking electricity or no water, then those issues need to be fixed before the program will pay the grant of back rent to the landlord.
Okay, so the first step is going to be to talk to your landlord because it's important that when you apply and the landlord applies, that the information you're both submitting matches about how much rent you owe. Also, keep an eye out if there's anything in your unit that needs repair. Now, for landlords, when they're filling in the application for this program, is there anything that they have to agree to do in order to get the money for your back rent?
Yeah, there are several things. So one thing they will agree to do, they're going to get all the money for the back rent. And to get the money, they need to agree that if they've already started some sort of eviction or termination process, that they will drop that, no matter what the reason for the eviction or termination. So it's sort of like a clean slate from that day going forward. They agree to not raise the rent before January 1st. They agree to not evict for non-payment as many months in the future as the grant is covered in the past. So if the grant covered 4 months in the past, the landlord agrees that they won't evict for non-payment for the next 4 months. That's capped at 6 months. So a landlord never has to promise to not evict for non-payment for more than 6 months. The landlord needs to agree to accept the Vermont State Housing Authority payment standard for the amount of rent. And what that means is that there is a statewide, well, it's actually county by county average of what is a fair market rent for certain sizes of apartments. And so it's possible that the tenant and landlord agreed to pay more than that for standard for rent. So for example, somebody might have agreed to pay $3,000 a month for a 1 bedroom. That would be way above what the Vermont State Housing Authority payment standard is. So if they agreed to take this grant money, they're only going to get grant money up to that fair market rent standard. And the landlord is going to agree to waive the rest for the purposes of those months that are covered. So what else is there? They agree that to waive late fees and that the apartment is up to rental housing health code.
Okay, so there's some promises that the landlord has to make to protect you as the tenant if they accept this money for your back rent. What happens if you talk to your landlord and the landlord says that they don't want to participate in this program?
Well, I think landlords should participate in the program. The eviction moratorium makes it so that nobody can be evicted. So in the meantime, if the landlord isn't getting rent, they might as well get money from this program so that they don't get too far behind in their operating costs. So I think some tenants might be shy about going to their landlords and saying, hey, I really need help. Can we apply for this program? I can understand it might be somewhat of an awkward conversation for some people, but it's a conversation certainly well worth having. Already, Vermont State Housing Authority has gotten applications from a couple of thousand pairs of landlords and tenants. This is a program that is good for landlords and good for tenants. And so, number one, have the awkward conversation. It will probably pay off. If your landlord, after looking at the website and having the conversation, is still got qualms, landlords can call Vermont Landlords Association. They don't have to be a member. They can call and get advice about whether or not this is a good idea for them in their particular situation. And tenants can call Vermont Legal Aid. Vermont Legal Aid can find out what's going on in the situation and figure out if we can extend any help to negotiating the situation so that people can apply and get money for the rental housing stabilization program.
Okay, great. So there is a phone number for the Vermont Landlords Association that I have here for the landlords. That's 888-569-7368. And the Vermont Legal Aid and Legal Services Vermont phone number for tenants is 1-800-889-2047. What about the opposite situation? If you are a landlord and you have a tenant who is behind on their rent and the tenant doesn't want to participate, is there any assistance available for people in that situation?
Well, when the program got set up, we imagined a situation where the relationship had broken down and the tenant wasn't communicating with the landlord, simply wasn't communicating. So the landlord can apply and receive half of the rent. So if the landlord and tenant apply together, they receive all of the back due rent. If the landlord applies by themselves, they can receive half the rent, and they still retain the right to proceed with an eviction once the court opens up. You said something that made me want to talk about another aspect of that, but I forgot what you said. So, yeah.
Well, let's move on and hopefully it'll come back to you. Let's see. So if someone has decided that they want to apply, landlord's on board, is there any kind of benefit to waiting to apply so that you can get more assistance with more rent payments?
No, not really, because you can apply as many successive times as are needed. So this is applying for past due rent. And let's say you catch your rent up through September, and then in November you find yourself behind or partially behind again, you can apply again. There is a fixed amount of money in the fund, but it's quite a bit of money. And projecting out how fast the money is going out the door, we have every reason to believe that this money will last through December. So there really isn't any benefit to waiting. We encourage people to get their rent accounts current because people can always come back later.
Okay, so there's no benefit to waiting to apply. You can apply as many times as you need to. So you should get your application in if you are currently behind on rent. What if you're planning on applying for the program and you already know that next month you're not going to be able to make rent either? Can you apply for future months?
Not with the back rent program. So the back rent program is only going to pay for rent that is past due. We're going to talk in a little bit about the money to move program. There is some aspect of paying rent in advance, because if you're moving, you usually need to pay security deposit first month, last month before you move in. So that's technically money in advance. But under the back rent program, you cannot apply until your rent is past due. In other words, if it's due on the 1st or the 5th, and it's later than that by a day or a week, then you can apply.
Okay, so if it's September right now and I already know I'm not going to be able to make October rent, I have to wait until my October rent is actually past due before I apply for that.
Yes.
Great. Thanks for that quick overview of the back rent assistance program. We also have a full town hall just about the back rent assistance. That was on July 16th, and the video is still up on our Vermont Legal Aid Facebook page. So if you want to go back and watch that for additional information, you still can. Let's move on and talk about the Money to Move program that you mentioned. Can you walk us through what that assistance is for?
So things change all the time. And so tenants might find themselves in apartments that no longer suitable for them. Perhaps a household member has moved out, job location has changed, something has happened. And looking forward to the future, they think they will be better off, their budgets will be better off in another apartment. So if a tenant can find a new landlord to rent to them, and the landlord agrees to rent to them, then the landlord, the prospective landlord, prospective tenant can apply together. And the Money to Move program will cover security deposit and whatever advance rent the landlord usually requires or is going to require for this tenant. So it can be first month's, last month's, whenever the last month occurs, and perhaps advance rent through December, if that's what it takes for the landlord to agree to rent to this particular tenant.
Okay, great. So there is assistance available for folks who have found a new apartment and need help being able to move there financially. How
Yes.
do people apply for this program?
There is an application on Vermont State Housing Authority's website. It's under the Money to Move tab, and it's a joint application. So one of the things that we learned with the back rent program is matching a tenant application with a landlord application really slowed down processing time. So because moving into a new apartment and having the certainty that you're going to be able to move into that apartment is pretty important, the Money to Move program wants to be processed faster. So it's a joint application between the prospective tenant and prospective landlord. And once that is completed and the landlord also sends the other documents that Vermont State Housing Authority needs to make a direct deposit, that is emailed to a special email address at Vermont State Housing Authority, and they process that application as fast as they can.
Okay, so again, similar to the back rent assistance, this application is on the Vermont State Housing Authority website, which is vsha.org. And there is a joint application between you as the potential tenant and the potential new landlord that you have to fill out together. Now, if someone has gone through this process of applying for the Money to Move, what do they need to list on that application as the tenant?
I should have mentioned this with the back rent program too. So the information required from the tenant is who is in the household, because only one household member should apply. In other words, two household members don't apply and then double the grant. It's got to be who is in the household and just one household member applying. And the address of the place and the name of the landlord and the landlord contact information and tenant contact information. And as with the back rent program, the tenant should be able to say, yes, I believe this unit meets the rental housing health code, and the landlord should be able to say that too.
Okay, so very similar application process to the back rent assistance. And for both of those programs, only one person in the household needs to complete the application. So if you have roommates and you're living together, you all want to apply for back rent assistance, just one person applies. Same thing, if you are moving with roommates, just one of you needs to fill out the application for the Money to Move program. Just make sure you list the information for everyone who's going to be living there or moving. With the Money to Move program, is there any promises that the landlord has to make when they accept the money for you moving into the apartment?
Yeah, similarly to the back rent program, the landlord has to promise not to raise the rent before January 1st or whatever lease term. So they could agree to a certain rent for a certain amount of months, and obviously they should not raise the rent before the end of the lease term. They are going to agree to not evict for non-payment eviction for until January 1st. And waive late fees. I think those are the things there. It's similar to the other program, although this is just about rent until December 30th, so that how many months you're getting, how many months you don't evict isn't quite the same. It's just a promise to not evict for non-payment until January 1st.
Okay. And if someone owes back rent at the current unit they're living in, and they are looking to move to a new unit with a new landlord, can they apply for both the back rent and the Money to Move programs?
Yeah, so if the unit that the tenants are living in, there is a back rent balance, yes, while the tenants are living there, they should apply and get the landlord paid the back rent balance. That's a good policy idea because landlords need to be paid so that they can maintain the units and make sure that that unit could be rented by someone else. The Money to Move program more or less requires you to be doing some thinking in advance. So you could literally have a back rent application in with your current landlord while putting in a money to move application with a future landlord. The back rent program should pay while you're living there, or the application should be made while you're living there. The money to move is in the future, and so could be granted so that you could move in the future.
Okay, so you can apply for both programs at the same time. If someone is having a hard time finding a new apartment to move into, is there any resources available to help find open apartments?
There are, the regular resources that ever were, which look in the newspaper, look on Craigslist, look on wherever apartments might be listed. It is really extremely hard to find a new rental unit. So people who are looking for rental units look every place they would normally look. One of the things I wanted to call attention to is there is a directory of affordable rental housing in Vermont. There's a website for it. I think you're gonna put the website in the chat or something and put that out there. And if you look at that website, you can check a list of vacancies. Now, not that there are a lot of vacant units, but there might be some, and that might be a place to check. And
Okay.
certainly, yeah, that would direct you to vacancies that are at any places that have subsidies that go with the project.
Okay, so that website, I do have it. It's housingdata.org/find-rental-housing. When you're applying for this program, do you need to list any specific reason that you need to move? Do you have to fit any specific categories?
I think to apply, the only requirement for this program is that you need a good reason to move. So it can't be, I just, like the view better from somewhere else. So there could be all sorts of reasons why people would want to move. Financial, clearly, if you're moving to a more affordable place for your household, or your household size has changed and you need to move to a place that fits your household and your household budget better. If you're moving to get away from a harassment situation, that would be a reason to move. If you're moving so you could be closer to your work or to your school, those are all good reasons to move. Yeah, you just need to list a good reason to move.
Okay. And do you have to have any income requirements or meet any income limits to qualify for the Money to Move program?
No, there are no income limits either for the back rent program or the Money to Move program.
Okay, no income limits, great. If people have questions about the Money to Move program, where can they go for help?
They can call Vermont Landlords Association. They can call Vermont Legal Aid. They can call Vermont State Housing Authority. It depends on the kind of question that they have. If they want to know how this affects their legal rights, or they're having some sort of obstacle, they should call, if they're a tenant, they should call Vermont Legal Aid. If they're a landlord, they should call Vermont Landlords Association.
All right, great. And I'll run through those phone numbers one more time. To call Vermont Legal Aid and Legal Services Vermont, we're at 1-800-889-2047. And if you are a landlord looking for information about this program, you can call the Landlords Association, and their number is 1-888-569-7368. And the application is on the Vermont State Housing Authority website, vsha.org. Now, we talked a lot about assistance for people who are renting where they live. What about the assistance that's available for people who own their homes and need help with mortgage payments? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Right, there's funding through Vermont Housing Finance Agency, which is vhfa.org/map. to help people who are homeowners with mortgage payments. And the program can pay up to 6 months of mortgage payments directly to people's mortgage companies or servicers. This payment money is also available for people who are making payments on mobile home loans. This program has been in existence since July, just like the back rent program. There have been some recent changes. There is no application deadline. They will continue to take applications until their fund runs out. This program for mortgage payment assistance does have financial eligibility requirements, but those have recently been raised. They're trying to capture how much income people have had in the last 90 days. And so right now, that limit of income, in other words, you have to have less than 100% of area median income, which for Chittenden County for the last 90 days would be $24,000 earned in the last 90 days. For the rest of the state, $21,000 for the last 90 days. And this is, they raised the income limit because it used to be $18,000 for Chittenden County for the last 90 days and $15,000 for the last 90 days for the rest of the state. So quite a few Vermonters are going to be eligible because it's now the income limit is based on median income. And they need to be 2 months behind on payments at the time of application. And they have to have a COVID-related hardship as a reason why they fell behind on mortgage payments. And that's about all I know about the mortgage payment assistance program.
All right. And I will flag that we did do a full town hall with one of our other Vermont legal aid attorneys, Grace, about the mortgage assistance program on July 23rd. So if you have questions about the application or how that program works, you can head over to our Facebook page for Vermont Legal Aid and watch the recording of that town hall from July 23rd. But there have been some updates to the program since that town hall aired. So what we're going to talk about is just the parts of that program that are new, which it sounds like the main things are there is a higher income eligibility requirement now, but some other updates include what happens if you have a mobile home and you are looking to apply for this program. I know when Grace spoke with us last time, there were some questions about that. Has that been resolved?
My understanding is it has. And so people with mobile home loans that they've fallen behind on, that they're paying for their mobile home, they can also ask for help from this program. And the income limit being raised, that's another thing that's changed. And the third thing that changed is there is no application deadline. They are going to continue to take applications until the fund runs out and or December, the end of the year, because this is also coronavirus relief funds and they need to be spent by the end of the year.
Okay, wonderful. So that about wraps up our prepared information. So we're going to go ahead and start taking some questions from the audience now. It looks like we do have one audience question I want to make sure we get to. It sounds like this is going back to what we talked about, the eviction moratorium, and maybe a little bit about the Money to Move program. We have a question from someone who's wondering what happens right now if your landlord sells your rental house for someone to relocate and is insisting that you as the tenant move. Is this something that we might be able to answer now, or is this a situation where someone might want to give us a call for more specific information about that situation?
So, this idea has come up a bit. We've discussed this. So the landlord owns the home and therefore could sell it. Selling a home is a legal reason for terminating a tenancy. So if a landlord sells a home, they can give a notice of termination showing that there's a contract to sell the home. However, in order to enforce that notice of termination, they would need to go to court to get a court order. The courts are closed. So I'm sure that situation would be frustrating for a homeowner who sold the home, but there is no legal way to get a tenant out because the courts are closed. So, you know, I guess if it's a single family home and it was bought by somebody who intends to live there, that's, you know, they could refuse to complete the sale if it's not vacant so that they can live there. But there are a number of buildings that if tenants are in there and there's a number of apartments in a building, tenants can stay and the next landlord becomes their landlord. So it doesn't have, buildings do not have to be vacant for a sale to be completed. For people who are in this situation and their landlord is pressuring them to move, I would suggest that maybe the landlord help them look for a new place. Right now, with things shut down, and Vermont has a very, very small vacancy rate. We do not have enough affordable housing. We don't have enough housing, period. So it's extremely hard to find a place to move. And maybe we should all help each other to try and figure out a place to move to. But the bottom line is the tenant can't be legally asked to move unless there's a court order to make them move. And so they can work with their landlord and volunteer to move, but they don't have to go unless there's a court order. And there won't be a court order because the moratorium is closing the courts for evictions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for walking us through that. Let's talk about some other more specific situations that could come up for folks when they're looking at these help with rent programs. If someone is currently experiencing homelessness, is there a way that they can access this funding to get housed?
Well, for folks who are currently experiencing homelessness, the best advice is to make an application through their coordinated entry site. The coordinated entry site list where the coordinated entry site in anybody's area is at helpingtohousevermont.org, or people can call 211 to find out where their coordinated entry site is. The reason for doing that for people who are currently experiencing homelessness is because coordinated entry sites have access to additional funding that can be done, that can be used to pay for things besides rent, like perhaps for a very low income person to clear up their back rent where they used to be, or for a family that's going to need housing and going to need help with housing for some time in the future. They have a number of subsidies that might go a couple of years in the future where this money ends on December 30th. So there are people who are currently experiencing homelessness are advised to start with their coordinated entry site. If people have been housed in a motel where the state paid for the motel after the middle of March, they are eligible for the Money to Move program. But we advise for people to start with their coordinated entry site first.
Okay, so if someone is currently experiencing homelessness, they can still be eligible for the rental help with Money to Move, but it makes sense to go through trying to find somewhere with your local coordinated entry site. And you can find that at helpingtohousevt.org, or you can call 211 and they can share that information. Let's talk a little bit about if someone is working on filling out the application for the Money to Move program and they have filled it out, sent it in, but their landlord hasn't sent something in. How long is it going to take to process that application?
Yeah, the Money to Move application is a joint application. It's 2.5 pages that have to be signed by both the tenant and the landlord. So the money, both in the back rent program and the Money to Move program, gets paid directly to the landlord's bank account by direct deposit. So a tenant can't apply for money to move and get cash in their hand. It is going to be directed to a landlord. So there isn't any way to really apply for money to move unless you have a landlord who's willing to rent to you.
Okay, so technically you can send the application in without the information from the landlord, but it's best if you apply together so that they have the complete application. Once a complete application is sent in, how long is it taking to get the funds for the back rent and the money to move to your current or new landlord?
I would imagine that the money to move funds might be processed a little quicker because there's a special email address for those to go to. And there are far more applications. As I say, there's been 2,000 landlords and tenant pairs have already applied, more than 2,000. And so Vermont State Housing Authority, when they get those back rent ones, they get a complete application and then they do data entry and they set it up for the next payment date. The payment dates are coming every 2 weeks. The money to move application comes in complete and it'll just be set up for the next payment date. So there are fewer of those. Data entry does not take as long. The last payment date was September 18th. So we believe that there'll be a payment date end of next week. And
Okay.
every 2 weeks after that.
Okay, great. So how fast it'll take to get the money depends on when you've submitted your application in that payment cycle. But it'll happen at the next payment cycle once your completed application is in. If people are in a situation where they've applied for the program with their landlord, but the landlord has also told them that they need to make extra payments on the side, is that allowed under this program?
No. So the landlord certification is that they are going to accept the money from the rental housing stabilization program as complete payment for any back rent that's owed. Late fees are waived. So if a landlord is saying, yes, but I need some more money for something else, that would be going against the landlord's promise when they agreed to take the rental housing stabilization program. And no, that's not allowed.
Okay, not allowed. Is there a situation where if someone is already, in an eviction proceeding with their landlord, can they still apply for these assistance programs?
Yes. One of the things about the rental housing stabilization program, the back rent program, is that the landlord agrees to drop any eviction, whether it's filed in court or it's just at the termination of tenancy stage. Of cases that get filed in court, studying from last year, 75% of them are for non-payment. And that's what the landlord's trying to do. They're trying to get paid for the rent that they're owed. So there are plenty of landlords who are pretty happy to take the rental housing stabilization program money and drop the eviction. I would advise tenants who are in an eviction to call Vermont Legal Aid. We can help you get the eviction dropped. We can make sure that the court paperwork is processed, that the landlord agrees with the settlement. So there's a lot of things. If you're currently in an eviction case, please call Legal Aid and we will help you settle the eviction case with the rental housing stabilization program.
Okay, and our phone number, if you're in that situation or any other situation that you want to talk about with us, is 1-800-889-2047. It looks like we don't have any more questions coming in from our audience, and we are drawing to the close of our time here together. So I want to say thank you to Jean for walking us through some quick information about a lot of the programs that we've done more in-depth town halls about. This is a great summary. But if you are looking for more detailed information, you can watch our town hall that was about the Vermont eviction moratorium. That was in July 16th, The recording of that town hall is on our Vermont Legal Aid Facebook program. If you want to go back and watch the town hall that was about the Money to Move program and the rental stabilization program, we had a full town hall on that, again on July 16th, all wrapped in together. And if you have more detailed questions about the mortgage assistance program, our full town hall about that program was with Grace on July 23rd. And keep in mind, there have been some updates to that program since we did that town hall on the 23rd. So if you want to watch that one, get a broader overview of how it works, and then come back and watch our updates with Jean today, this video is going to be uploaded to our Facebook page as well, and will be available if you want to go back and learn about those new updates since we talked to Grace on the 23rd of July. I'll also leave you with some important phone numbers and websites if you're interested in finding out more about the programs that we talked about today. If you want to talk to the Vermont Legal Aid or Legal Services Vermont, phone number again, 1-800-889-2047. And you can also find lots of information on our website, vtlawhelp.org. If you are looking to apply for the assistance with your back rent or the Money to Move program, all the application materials are going to be on the Vermont State Housing Authority website, vsha.org. Again, if you are a landlord and you have questions about this program, you can contact the Vermont Landlords Association at 888-569-7368. And they are taking questions from landlords about this program, even if you are not a member of the association. If you're looking for applying for the mortgage assistance program through the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, that application is on their website, vhfa.org. And if you are someone who is experiencing homelessness and you are looking to apply for and find an apartment with the Money to Move program, you can start by working with your coordinated entry site or looking at helpingtohousevt.org or calling 211 with those programs. I want to say a big thank you again to Jean for coming out today to talk with us about these programs. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Jean.
Thank you, Annalee. And anybody who has questions, they should call Legal Aid because we would really like to make sure that people don't have a rent debt by the end of the year. That would be, I really appreciate that Vermont has made this program available for Vermonters so that we don't have an eviction crisis or a homelessness crisis that's any worse than we had when we started. And so people should apply for this program. And if they have any problems, give Vermont Legal Aid or the Landlords Association a call. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. Thank you to everyone who joined us today on Zoom, Facebook Live, or over the phone to participate in our town hall. Keep an eye out on our Vermont Legal Aid Facebook page for announcements about our upcoming town hall series. And stay safe, stay healthy out there, Vermont.